Xtalks connects professionals in the life science, medical device, and food industries with useful content like webinars, job openings, articles, and virtual meetings to help you succeed in your career. This food industry-focused podcast brings together some of our editorial staff to share insights into the latest B2B industry news to help keep you up to date. This week on the show, we are discussing titanium dioxide alternatives as ban concerns intensify, and a lab-grown meat ban looming in Italy in a bid to protect their food heritage. Enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Xtalks Food Podcast. I'm Sydney Perlmutter, Senior Food Industry Journalist and Webinar Moderator at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm joined by Aisha Rashid, Vera Kovacevic, and Sarah Hand. Thanks for coming today. So I am going to start us off with a very interesting topic about titanium dioxide. It's been put in the spotlight recently after a California, it was a bill that was proposed in California that if it was passed, it would make it the first state to ban the sale and manufacture of foods containing titanium dioxide, among other chemicals and dyes. And if you don't know what titanium dioxide is, I will get into it very, very soon. But it's unclear at this point in time whether the bill has enough momentum to pass, but it's certainly intensified the search to replace titanium dioxide or find alternatives for it. And although the ingredient would remain generally recognized as safe, or GRAS, by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration at levels of no more than 1% of the food by weight, food manufacturers would have to find titanium dioxide alternatives and potentially reformulate recipes. And currently more than 1,800 brand name food products in the U.S. have titanium dioxide listed in the ingredient statement. Now, in a response to the proposed bill, several food industry groups sent a letter opposing the bill, saying that all 5 of these additives, and those include red dye number 3, which I've talked about before, titanium dioxide, potassium bromate, brominated vegetable oil, and propylparaben, I believe is how you pronounce it, have been thoroughly reviewed by the federal and state systems and many international scientific bodies and continue to be deemed safe. So these food industry groups obviously are, not happy about a potential ban just because of how much, possible work would have to go into finding a replacement. So now, as promised, I'll talk a little bit about what titanium dioxide is. So, from its name, it's made from titanium, which is an element in the Earth's crust and a transition metal on the periodic table, bringing us back to, grade school science. Now, the ingredient is used in paint, whiteout, skincare products, namely sunscreen, and it functions as an ultraviolet light filter. And in food, it's long been used as a coloring agent to whiten or provide a cloudy effect in products like candies, gum, sauces, and baked goods, among many others. Now, in the U.S., titanium dioxide may not be in foods with a standard of identity, or SOI, unless it is included in the standard. So that does not make sense. So an example of that is the standard for mozzarella cheese states that coloring may be used to mask any natural yellow color in the curd. But on the other hand, Monterey Jack cheese does not have color included in its SOI. So while it is a white cheese, color cannot be added to make it any whiter. But with mozzarella, as may be done with mozzarella. So the ingredient has been in and out of the food safety conversation since the European Food Safety Authority banned its use as a food additive in the EU in 2021. But a handful of U.S. chains like Panera Bread have already outpaced regulators here, and they announced that, they'll no longer sell products that contain the ingredient. And like I said, although it is currently approved for use in the U.S., formulators in North America and Europe are looking for titanium dioxide alternatives in everything from creamers to cheeses and cake frostings to hard shell candies. Now, it's not as simple as you would think to find an alternatives, and formulating food products without the unique properties of titanium dioxide is quite a complex technical challenge. So the ingredient, it boasts heat-stable opacity and a bright white color, and these are properties that are very appealing when it comes to maximizing a product's visual appeal. But for companies that are tasked with finding titanium dioxide alternatives, unfortunately, there's no single universal replacement. But the list of replacements is growing. One is rice starch, which is not only natural, but it's also fairly inexpensive. Another option is calcium carbonate, which has whitening properties and provides the benefits of strengthening as well, the calcium for teeth. But both of these alternatives can affect the consistency and texture of the final product. And that's why several ingredients makers are working on titanium dioxides without these drawbacks. So I found a couple. One is from a Chicago-based company called ADM, and it offers a product called Pearl Edge, a proprietary white color solution derived from natural sources. And in a press release, the global product marketing vice president said, "Our team has been diligently working to perfect our new line of white color solutions, assuring its groundbreaking quality and performance. This rollout meets the evolving needs of customers and consumers as brands look for titanium dioxide replacements that not only provide a bright white shade, but also meet clean label targets." And there's another ingredient maker called Sensient that offers something called Avalanche, which the company claims has been the sole viable titanium dioxide alternative on the market. And Avalanche comes in a portfolio of simple ingredient starch and mineral-based solutions that have various applications from baking, confectionery, dairy, dry goods, and panned applications, among others. And then we also have other companies like Ingredion and NCC Food Ingredients that actually work directly with food producers from reformulation to new product development in order to determine which titanium dioxide is right for them. So, one thing I actually realized now that I didn't really touch on was why we need a replacement or why California is looking to ban it. And there's been many studies over the last several years that sort of have deemed the ingredient, a carcinogen and dangerous, like many food dyes are. I've talked about red dye 3 before, and that's why it's also part of this this bill that California's put together and is hoping to pass. Because we've really learned over the past couple years how potentially dangerous food additives and coloring can be, and really for what? I mean, it doesn't really add much to the food aside from pretty colors to attract children and whoever else, because unfortunately these things are found in candies and I'm a big gum chewer. I know that titanium dioxide is found in white gum, but yeah, I want to get your thoughts on this. It's a very a bit of a scientific topic, so I want to know if you heard about the dangers of titanium dioxide and like how involved or intricate do you think this process would be for like sort of an industry-wide take on of a replacement, let's say?
Well, I was just looking at the history of titanium dioxide, and according to USA Today, it says the FDA first approved the use of titanium dioxide in food in 1966. So that was over 50 years ago. Yeah. So I think just like the scientific toxicity tests that were around in the 60s are not as sensitive as the ones we have today. For sure. Yeah. And I think perhaps that's why it was banned by the European agency, you said. So, yeah, that's kind of, the European Food Safety Authority is a big, organization. It covers lots of countries. And I'm almost wondering, well, if they banned it, like, what is the FDA waiting for? I don't know, because it's strange to me that they would go so extreme as to ban it. Like, they didn't even lower the amount that's allowed in food. They just completely banned it. So
I think Europe has a long history of being much more conservative, I think, with these ingredients and just going ahead and saying, nope, we're not allowing the food industry to use these anymore. Like they correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they banned that red 3 color additive like years and years and years ago, right? And then this conversation in the US and North America in general has been continuing on of like, I don't know, should we still be using this? I think and this is sort of a bigger conversation, but I think the FDA, when it comes to food at least, has a bit more of a reputation of like being influenced by the food industry and lobbyists, and so this is, as you were saying, Sydney, a big challenge to have to reformulate your product. Like, it seems like it shouldn't be. Like, from our perspective, when you look at it, you think, oh, what's the problem? Just replace it with rice starch or whatever. But the textural changes, the like stability changes, there is so much food science that goes into these things. And then at the end consumer level, if you're picking up a package of whatever it is, if you're picking up some coffee creamer and you expect it to be one way and it's another, like, all of a sudden maybe you've lost that consumer, because they're like, oh, I don't like this anymore, and they move on to another product. It's so cutthroat. So I think this is like challenging. I think, the FDA has a role to keep consumers safe, but I think they're also trying to balance that out with making things not too difficult for the food industry, like, for better or worse. I don't know. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, Vera, I think, Europe is so much more stringent on these food safety things than North America and the United States is.
It's got to be maybe a bit of like a culture thing too. Like I can't, I personally wouldn't be, I'd be happier with a cleaner, product rather than it being the color I'm expecting. And maybe that's just something that Europeans are used to, and it must be the types of food that we consume as well, or Americans consume. Maybe there's a bit more like, maybe there's just more consumption of foods that have these ingredients in them, and we've just become so used to the way that they look, because it never alters the taste or anything. These are just superficial additives, right, for the most part. And it's interesting too, because this bill it only applies to California if it's passed too. This is just like a statewide level. We're not even talking like FDA yet. So you're totally right, Vera. Like, the FDA feels like pretty far behind when it comes to this food safety stuff. And of course, there's going to be backlash from the food industry because of how intricate it would be to reformulate things. But it'll be interesting to see whether, like, the preference for like clean label becomes more prevalent, and whether that will speed up the process a little bit too. Because at this point, I think when consumers aren't even aware like what titanium dioxide is and aren't really paying attention to all the ingredients like in the foods that they're eating, I feel like there's not going to be like much of a change, unfortunately.
The only benefit I can see from the side of the food companies, because this is like a huge undertaking just to replace one little ingredient. And if it's warranted, it's warranted, obviously, if it's, carcinogenic in large enough quantities. But the only benefit I can see for them is the ability to reformulate their products and then come out with something that, they can call clean label. Or if it seems like if this bill passes in California specifically, seems like everybody knows all of a sudden about the role of titanium dioxide in foods, and now everyone's avoiding it like they would other, key phrases like other hot button topics, then all of a sudden they could be like, now titanium dioxide free or whatever. They can make those like label claims and maybe differentiate themselves from competitors, but it still definitely takes time to achieve that reformulation. And I think you touched on something really interesting there, Sydney, about how in North America we are so used to consistency between batches of products that we get. So if you think about, the loaf of like Wonder Bread you get from the grocery store, like it always looks like the same bread, like what that is. Whereas in a lot of European countries, like the idea of like a soft loaf of white bread like that just like lasts for weeks and weeks on your counter is just like not a thing. Like they very much value being able to like go out every day and get a new loaf of fresh bread from a bakery, and maybe one day the shape is like slightly different, and that does not faze anybody. But you're right, I think products, especially these highly processed products, we're really used to them looking the same, that consistency. It's like how they say, like a McDonald's, like hamburger is the same anywhere in the world. Everyone's used to it. They know what they're going to get. And so maybe it's just a matter of kind of like trying to break free of that a little bit. And then maybe if your mozzarella cheese isn't completely milky white, but it's still fine, maybe that's okay. If we can get used to seeing that and not thinking something is amiss. Yeah. But that's definitely a huge undertaking for the food companies themselves, and a huge challenge then to educate consumers of this doesn't look as white as it used to be. It's still fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be almost a paradigm shift, if I can say, because there's, this is so prevalent in so many products. And yeah, I think we have a completely different climate here, food climate in North America than in Europe. I think, isn't it in France where record numbers of McDonald's were shutting down, or I think they just even pulled their business from France because just no consumer demand. So it's very interesting to see the differences between the continents. And what's also interesting to me is in the U.S. how states have so much power or authority in their own governance, right? So here you have California taking the initiative to ban titanium dioxide, and it's not the first time California has, sort of been ahead of these kinds of more innovative thoughts or changes, paradigm shifts. I mean, we won't be speaking politically, but just in terms of just trying to incite and embody changes, California has always been sort of at the forefront. And so it's going to be interesting to see how many other states follow suit. If they follow suit, how does that translate into what the FDA is going to be doing? So it's very interesting, particularly in the U.S., how the food climate is number one, and number two, how the regulations also come into play in terms of at the state level and then at the federal level as well. And this is going to be a big thing for the food industry. I can't imagine how much of a shift is going to have to occur in terms of food companies adapting to this potential ban, because it's going to, as you've all pointed out, it's going to be a lot involved in making that shift. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
So moving on to another potential ban, this one involves lab-grown meat and Italy. So, a couple months ago, we had the U.S. Government finally approve the concept and get more comfortable with the concept of lab-grown meat. But now Italy's government approved a draft law of a ban of lab-grown meat, among other lab-grown foods as well. Now, the bill would prohibit the use of laboratory-produced food and animal feed, as it aims to protect the country's food heritage. So these stories are actually pretty related. Now, under this ban, which needs to be passed by in both houses of parliament before becoming law, those who produce, export, or import lab-grown food would face fines of up to €60,000, which is about $65,000, and risk having their manufacturing plants closed. Calling for the protection of natural food versus synthetic food, lobbyists have collected 500,000 signatures in recent months, including that of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who is the Prime Minister of Italy. And the push for a lab-grown meat ban comes just days after her government issued a ban on the use of insect-derived flour in pizza and pasta. So really tying into this whole food heritage thing. Now, the production of lab-grown food, which activists argue avoids the need for animals to be killed and is a more sustainable alternative to natural food, the market has not taken off in Europe yet, and it's expected to actually just be years before such products appear on supermarket shelves. And the potential lab-grown meat ban is a very preemptive move to safeguard Italy's heritage and agriculture based on their infamous Mediterranean diet. Now, in a response to the proposed lab-grown meat ban, Cellular Agriculture Europe, which is a coalition of food companies that produce lab-grown meat, poultry, seafood, and other ingredients, called it bad public policy. And the group added that the ban could be damaging the economic opportunity for Italy and the EU to be at the forefront of this innovation. Cellular Agriculture Europe wasn't the only group to oppose the lab-grown meat ban. Alice Ravenscroft, who's head of policy at the Good Food Institute of Europe, which represents the alternative protein industry, told BBC, this development puts Italy at odds with the rest of Europe, where other governments are eager to unlock the benefits of cultivated meat. Now, currently, Singapore is the only country to have allowed the sale of lab-grown chicken, while 2 companies in the U.S., Upside Foods and Good Meat, have been granted regulatory clearance by the FDA to produce lab-grown chicken. And meanwhile, several European countries, including the UK, Netherlands, and Spain, have announced investments in the research and development of cell-based foods. However, no approval has been authorized within the EU as of yet, but the European Food Safety Union has said that cell-based agriculture in seafood could be considered as a promising and innovative solution to help achieving the objectives of the farm-to-fork strategy for fair, safe, healthy, and environmentally friendly food systems. Still, Italy would not be able to oppose the sale of synthetic meat produced within the EU if it is granted approval due to free movement of goods and services. Ravenscroft told The Guardian in another story, she said, Italy is essentially a complete outlier here. What we're seeing across the rest of Europe is that other governments are eager to unlock some of the benefits of cultivated meat and are therefore being supportive. So this story, it's funny. It kind of surprised me, but it also kind of didn't. And, it brings up the topic of, was this move way too preemptive? Does it make them look bad? Personally, I think kind of yes to both of those things. But yeah, I want to know, do you think that, let's say in a decade, if lab-grown meat really, the industry does take off in Europe, would it threaten the, Italy's food heritage? Or do you think that, they can work side by side and those who want to try it can, those who don't have to?
Well, I honestly think they're Italy is acting a little anti-innovation
Yeah.
Because that's not a fair reason to ban lab-grown meat because you want to protect the heritage of the country. If that's they're not giving their consumers any choice if that's the reason. Mm-hmm. They're just saying, nope, we don't like the idea, whatever, we're not going to allow it in our country. That's kind of extreme, that's not a good reason to ban something. If it was for we don't have enough information about the manufacturing or safety of these products, we're just going to ban it until we get that information. That's a legit reason, in my opinion. But saying denying their own citizens the right to consume a product just because it's their ideology, right? That's not a good reason for me.
Well, Italy, obviously has a very strong food history, food heritage, and so they take their food very, very seriously. But at the same time, it just makes me think that there's probably a very strong meat lobby.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
In the country, right? For this to have taken effect so preemptively. So that's what that, tells me that's probably likely what's going on, that meat producers have probably a strong say in what is going to be happening on the regulatory side in terms of the introduction of lab-grown meat around the world eventually. And so they're already, jumping the gun and kind of oh no, what's going to happen? So yeah, but like Vera is saying, denying people the choice, I think that's a little bit, a little authoritarian almost, but it's interesting to see how, how people and how countries are, going to be dealing with this completely new form of food product. And there are a lot of unknowns, and lab-grown meat is not quite there yet at all. Mm-hmm. As you know, I think, Sydney, you're going to talk about another story again to do with that. But I think this is a little premature on behalf of Italy. But again, like I said, it's probably a very, very strong meat industry there that is quite concerned about what the future might hold.
And also clearly like a strong pasta industry too, because of the ban on the use of insect-derived flour like in pizza and pasta. I thought that was also like so interesting, and like that one I don't consider it as preemptive, just because like the EFSA has been very proactive with sort of granting approval for like cricket and and insect-derived foods. But yeah, I just I agree with you, all of you guys. Like it's just a little bit too preemptive. And obviously, as consumers, or at least me personally, I don't like being told what I can and can't try when it comes to food. Like it just doesn't seem like the place of a government really, unless it's literally going to kill me. So yeah, and we're just so far from that as well. It just that's why I was confused by it, but I also I understand how seriously Italy takes its food, but I still also don't think that would threaten their normal food industry. And you're not really, I don't envision anyone going to Italy to try their lab grown meat. I think people are still going to go to Italy, and those that live there are still going to consume their traditional foods that they want to, and if and when we do see lab-grown meat, the market take off there, then yeah, they should be entitled to try it if they so please. It does feel kind of just like a weird violation of rights. But yeah, even to, for the prime minister, and it does feel like a little bit more of a right-leaning, political statement. I just know how pervasive the meat, and just in general, how pervasive the meat industry and just natural foods in general are to politics. For some reason, I think in recent years they've become more intertwined. I think the general fear is that people don't want the foods they've been used to eating for their entire lives to be threatened or gone. And I don't think that will be the case. I just think it's a bit of a fear-based, actions that are being taken there. But yeah, I hope it doesn't pass. And I don't really know what to say. Even if it does, though, so many countries, like I said, are working on cell-based meat and other foods. So I don't think that it'll really affect the broader industry as it continues to develop.
Yeah, and I feel like the way this whole proposed ban was positioned, in terms of, protecting the country's food heritage, makes it sound like it's either ban lab-grown meat or that's it. That's your only choice now, will be lab-grown meat. You know what I mean? As if nobody will have the choice between two different things.
Coexist.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me wonder, well, now that we have two examples of the lab-grown meat and the insect-derived flour, in pizza and pasta, it makes me wonder, what are Italians' overall views on other substitutes? I don't know, what is the non-dairy milk market like there? Or other meat substitutes, do they have Beyond Burgers and things like that, or are they just going for, if they're eating meat, they're eating meat? It does make me think that this is a decision made by an older generation of lobbyists and political people, as opposed to, I would guess that the younger generation is maybe a little more liberal and willing to try things. And in a place like Italy, I think if they allowed this, it would very much be a minority thing. I cannot see in any future that this would completely overtake their traditional agricultural and meat production industries. So yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying, and I think it is sort of a thinly veiled cover up for the meat lobby there. That's all I can think.
Yeah, like no one is forcing anything down anyone's throat. And I think, that's kind of the fear. Like it'll be replaced and that'll be your only option. So we have to move now. Otherwise, what you're used to will be gone forever. And I think it's a bit of fear mongering, honestly. I absolutely love meat and dairy, traditional meat and dairy. But I'm not, at least in my lifetime, scared that I won't have access to it at some point. And Italy, and we talked about Italy a couple of weeks ago on the show too, that, when Starbucks initially entered the country, there were riots, remember?
Wow.
Because Italy's coffee, they take their coffee pretty seriously too. So clearly they're very, very protective and overbearing of their own food culture. And they absolutely have the right to do that and protect it. But I don't think this is a productive way of doing so.
And that feels like such another example. That seems like a whole polar opposite to this, because that's a major North American food company,
right.
Fast food essentially company coming into the country. I get that a lot more than I get this, because I don't think there's any threat of these lab-grown meat companies all of a sudden becoming the Starbucks of the country and running running smaller producers out of town. So yeah.
Well, awesome discussion. I think next week we'll have a episode that doesn't include any bans. I think we've covered a lot of bans this episode, but really enjoyed the conversation. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Xtalks Food Podcast. And if you like today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks, everyone, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Xtalks Food Industry Podcast. If you enjoyed our discussions today, please share the episode with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe in order to be notified when a new episode is released. To join in on the discussion, you can find Xtalks on social media, email podcast@xtalks.com, or comment on the articles directly. Links are in the show description. Take a moment to join our community at xtalks.com to get access to everything we have to offer, including webinars, job listings, virtual meetings, articles, and more. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers sharing them. They should not be taken as professional advice and do not necessarily reflect the policy or position Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.